So a little while ago I did a video all about books that are based on classical mythology from ancient Greece or ancient Rome. These are books retelling myths either in an ancient setting or in a more modern setting. I felt when I was filming that video though that I could have encompassed so many other books in it if my definition was a slightly looser. There are so many books inspired by classics and antiquity in general that I wanted to mention but felt like I'd kind of boxed myself in with the myth theme. So I thought it might just be fun to do a more general book recommendations of books that are inspired by classics, ancient Greece, ancient Rome and mythology in general. Because of that more general theme, there is a really wide variety of different types of books in this video, hopefully something for everybody. And without further ado, let's get into the books, shall we? First up, I'm going to start with a book that is inspired by a myth. It's set in a modern setting and is specifically taking its cue from one piece of ancient literature, which is Ovid's Metamorphoses, which was an ancient Roman epic poem. And it may come as a surprise to you, but that is in fact The Vegetarian by Han Kang. Now this story actually takes a lot of its influence from, like I mentioned, Ovid's Metamorphoses and specifically the myth of Daphne and Apollo. In the myth of Daphne and Apollo, Apollo takes a liking to Daphne and pursues her in order to have sex with her. But she does not want to have sex with the god. His advances are unwanted, so she flees from his pursuit. In the hopes of being saved from one god, she prays to the other gods to help her, and they interpret her wishes by turning her into a tree. Now, if you've read The Vegetarian, you can probably see a lot of the inspiration from that myth in this story already, and if you read it, you'll definitely be able to pick up on themes of the body, of female sexuality, of lack of control over one's body, the misuse of one's body by others, all of those kind of themes, as well as quite a lot of references to trees. So although I believe this book completely stands on its own, that's a nice extra added level, I think, to give it as a reader. The book itself is set in South Korea. Han Kang is a Korean author and the book was originally written in Korean and was translated into English by Deborah Smith. It follows one woman, but we never get her perspective. We have 3 chapters, each told from the perspective of somebody else in her life. Her husband, her sister's husband, and then her sister herself. It deals with her mental health as well as her lack of control over her own body, sexist attitudes in her culture and society, and her attempt to kind of reclaim herself through what starts as becoming a vegetarian and ends up progressing quite extremely as the book goes on. It's a wonderful, wonderful story, very short, and I would recommend it to anybody. The next book, although also set in a modern setting, I feel is quite different in the inspiration it takes from Antiquity, and that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. Now this story follows a group of students, predominantly following our main student, who comes to this university late and wishes to take ancient Greek and Latin. The ancient Greek class, however, is a very cliquey group, and he has to sort of ingratiate himself into becoming a part of that clique. But when he becomes a part of that clique, it leads to some really strange relationships, unhealthy interactions, and strange group mentality, and they try to recreate what in Antiquity was known as a bacchanalia in the Latin, which is this celebration of the god Dionysus or Bacchus, who's the god of wine and parties essentially, and it all takes a very dark turn in the middle. You know from the outset of the book that somebody dies. How that happens you don't learn until the middle, so I won't spoil that for you, but it's all about the lead up to and the aftermath of this death. Tons of references to Antiquity and classics for those of you that are interested, as well as a little bit of ancient Greek thrown in there now and then, but also a phenomenally intriguing, dark, beautifully written, interesting novel for anybody to read. Next up is a book I think has an incredibly intriguing concept and inspiration behind it, and that is The Just City by Jo Walton. This book is actually inspired by Plato's Republic. Now, Plato's Republic was a piece of ancient Greek philosophical writing. Plato was famously an ancient Greek philosopher, and his Republic is a hypothetical utopian society that he believes would be the most just society there is. And of course it comes from a very ancient Greek Athenian perspective, although he has a lot of objections to the Athenian society that he lives in. Plato was not a democrat and didn't believe in democracy. His system is actually incredibly hierarchical. Safe to say, however, that the Republic is not my dream society, but it's such an interesting concept to take that book and basically write a story set in this utopian society. It's set in Antiquity and it revolves around the gods who have decided they want to test out Plato's dream by creating this society cut off from the rest of the world, so that if it all goes terribly wrong they don't have to deal with the after effects of it interacting with the rest of the world. And they even take it as far to pick the people that will live in their society from throughout time. Absolutely fascinating concept, and I'm a big fan of what Jo Walton does in general. She writes some really interesting stuff in a variety of different kind of genres. Next up is a book I completely forgot to mention in my other video, and that is Exo Orpheus 50 New Myths, edited by Kate Bernheimer. This is a collection of short stories by various different authors, all retelling ancient myths. Now in all fairness, this probably didn't quite fit into my other video because it's not purely Greek and Roman myths. There's Aztec in here, as well as countless other mythologies, but it does include Greek and Roman myths, so I thought I could include it in this video. Some of the classical mythology it includes are Daedalus and Icarus, Narcissus and Echo, Orpheus and Eurydice, Pygmalion and Galatea, and Argos, Odysseus's faithful dog, interestingly enough. But we also see characters from Indian, Punjabi, Inuit, and so many other different mythological backgrounds. So that's a really fascinating concept in itself. And because of the variety of settings, mythologies, and writers, each one is truly unique. And lastly, for this video at least, something completely different, and that's The Walled Orchard by Tom Holt. Tom Holt is one of my favourite comedic writers. He writes a lot of comedic fantasy, but in this book he decides to take on Antiquity and sets one of his comedic novels in classical Athens. The first sentence on the blurb is, "The hero is Eumolpus, weary, cynical, and believing only in comedy." The story itself, of course, focuses in on the stages of classical Athens, which were an important centre of Athenian life in so many ways, and deals with both Athenian comedy and tragedy. Modern humorous novels set in Antiquity is certainly not a genre I'm immensely familiar with, so I think it's really fun to have something like that out there, especially since I'm a big fan of television and film comedies that have tackled Antiquity, and I think really comedy can make some of the most interesting observations on any aspect of any society. It's something I think is a really interesting tool to see how it can be used. I'm going to stick to those 5 for now. There are so many other books with classical themes, classical allusions, and ancient settings that I could mention to you, so if you did enjoy this video, let me know and I will film another one in the future. We'll call this installment 1, shall we? And if you didn't manage to check out my books based on classical myths video, then I will link that up here down below, as well as my video on where to read the original ancient Greek and Roman myths if you're interested in a bit of classical literature. Until next time though, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys!